Greetings, friends. Today I watched this video by Computing Forever, and I'm not really a fan of Computing Forever, but he has a very large following, and sometimes his videos pop up, and I check some of them out. And overall, I agree with a lot of the things he has to say. But obviously, if we succeeded in overcoming the craziness of the left and social justice, if we succeeded in that task, then I think we would become enemies pretty fast over MGTOW and other subjects, maybe about, government, I don't know. But basically, I wish him all the best. And in this video, I agree with his message. And the particular video I want to react to here is called The BBC's Soft Bigotry of Low Expectations. So I agree with Computing Forever that the diversity agenda is being pushed on many companies, especially in the media industry, including the BBC. So the first 30 seconds I cut out because that's not necessary for us to listen to here, but he's just talking about how, if you're a white male, and like they didn't fire, but they didn't renew the contract of this particular BBC presenter called John Holmes, who I've never heard of, but and then John Holmes tweeted out, oh, it's because I'm a white male, or something to do with that, and not really in an angry fashion, but just kind of in a sort of friendly jab, I guess he tweeted that out. And so we don't need to listen to that. But yeah, that overall, situation is not anything new. I don't really need to attack social justice on this channel because everyone's doing it. You can go to Sargon, or you can, I don't need to do that. But because I'm a language guy, and I sometimes make videos about, not too often, because what can you really do? But sometimes I like to think about languages when I'm not studying them. And in this video, he's talking about Pidgin English, specifically from West Africa. So I'm just gonna, I'm gonna react to what he has to say. I listened to this one time, and there were some things I disagreed with. So now we can listen to it together, and I guess I'll give you my reaction as best I can in the moment. So let's have a listen to it.
Just this week, the good old Beeb, in their wisdom, decided to launch a new international news service. Well, where are those taxpayer pounds going to this time? You're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you. This is it. BBC Pidgin, a news service aimed at West African audiences. This is not a joke.
So just to clarify, when he says West African audiences, he can only realistically mean Ghana and Nigeria, because all the other African countries in that region are not English officially, like they're former French colonies. So, English will still be spoken as a business language, maybe in some of those countries. Generally, he means Ghana and Nigeria. By the way, more economically successful than the former French possessions. I wonder why. Could it have something to do with the British Empire? Anyways, let's continue.
This is not a parody website. It's a real website. Yeah, a news website entirely in Pidgin English, which is to say broken English. Now, I may get some heat on this one, but bear with me while I make my case.
Is Pidgin English broken English? Yeah, and I'm speaking as someone who's spent many months living in Ghana, which is in English, English is the language of government, but most people don't speak English so fluently, but they do speak some form of Pidgin English. It's very widely spoken. It might even in some ways be the most commonly spoken language. People tend to switch from their tribal language to Pidgin, and even into a more educated form of English, depending on the circumstances. If you're a town-dwelling person who's had a rudimentary education, if you're just a village person, then no. But he said that Pidgin is a broken form of English. I guess he's right. This is the definition off of the dictionary. Pidgin, number one, an auxiliary language that has come into existence through the attempts by the speakers of two different languages to communicate, and that is primarily a simplified form of one of the languages, with a reduced vocabulary and grammatical structure and considerable variation in pronunciation. Number two, more loosely, any simplified or broken form of a language, especially when used for communication between speakers of different languages. Right. So I think that's probably fairly accurate. I have to, so he's right. It is kind of a broken form of English, at least, but that's how it begins. It begins in the contact, or it began during the contact of English colonists, traders, missionaries, specifically missionaries and traders with Africa. But those people aren't around anymore. Okay, so Ghana's had Pidgin English now for a long, long time. I mean, it's been the first independent country since 1957 in Africa, and Nigeria would have followed sometime after that. And so there you have, you know, and even before that, it would have been developing over some time. So I think, yeah, I don't know if you could still call it a broken form of language, but yeah, there's Pidgin everything, right? There's Pidgin English, there's different forms of Pidgin languages. All the European languages had their Pidgin form. What if West African Pidgin is a broken form of English? Are you going to say the same thing about Jamaican Patois? I mean, they've been speaking that there practically since the 1600s, like centuries. So, yeah, I mean, it's a slippery slope to, what I'm getting at here is that I don't really think it's English. They're not really trying to copy English. But let's continue listening.
As to why this is a truly heinous idea. First of all, there's probably going to be a small percentage of folks in the comments saying something like, Dave, I don't see a problem. I mean, Pidgin English is a beautifully rich and diverse language. Educate yourself. It's so nuanced and eclectic. It's spoken in numerous African nations. If the BBC can be translated.
Well, it's not so nuanced, and but yeah, it's got its unique flow. I mean, and then sometimes they just say things in a different way. Like one thing I like about Ghanaian, look, first of all, language in general is very it's always morphing, it's always changing. So it's a mistake to think that a language can be constrained or should be constrained, right? The same reason we want free speech on the internet, right? Same idea. Languages are naturally organic. Why is English the most successful language in the history of the world? Because it was never constrained by an academy like French or Spanish, where they say, oh, this is the correct form and anything outside this is incorrect. It's like, no, English didn't do that. American English is different from British English, Irish English, and Indian English. Oh my goodness, in India, they created their own form of English over there, and they own it now. But still, at least it allows us to communicate better than if they weren't speaking anything with English. Isn't the world better because now they have English over there? I think it is. So, yeah.
Played into languages like French, Chinese, Spanish, and Italian. Why not?
Right. Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say. Is in Ghanaian Pidgin. This is great. I love this. If you say like, you understand me? Do you understand me? The response to that is yeah, I overstand you. So they don't say, if you respond to that, you say, I overstand you. I love that, yeah.
Pidgin as well. Okay, first of all, those are officially recognized languages. Pidgin isn't. It's an attempt.
Yeah, Pidgin isn't officially recognized. Many languages aren't officially recognized. And who cares? Who does the recognizing? Some silly academy or... I mean, okay, maybe other organizations. I mean, yeah, of course there's a certain... yeah, I mean, European languages are better and more... Yeah, I believe the West is the best, and they're more sophisticated. They have way more vocabulary. That's probably true. They're probably... Yeah, I've studied Awe, and I don't think it has the same vocabulary as English, of course. But they do have still a lot of words, and they're still creating things. And I don't think they're necessarily trying to copy English. They're doing what they have to do in the circumstances to get by, and sometimes that means taking from another language. But you're not taking it, you're using it. So English is still infiltrating them. It's a good thing in a way. It's not a bad thing that Pidgin languages exist. We should not be afraid of this. If the BBC want to have some web pages on their website, in Pidgin, yeah, it does look silly, and yeah, they have a crazy diversity agenda. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't really see this as a significant issue.
attempt at speaking English. It is a semi-literate attempt at the language. People who are semi-literate at English are speaking Pidgin.
Well, yeah, they're not fully literate, a lot of these people. That's just how the developing countries are. They didn't even have written languages before the Europeans came along. They didn't have them. So, yeah, semi-literate attempt? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, most of these people aren't speaking Pidgin so that they can move to the United Kingdom or Ireland. They're just, Pidgin is the local language there over many decades, since the 19th century. Since the colonial officials have been going in there. That's just their language now.
These are people with little to no education in very, very poor parts of the world. Hence the reason they're speaking Pidgin. If I attempt to learn Spanish, say, and I work hard at it for a couple of months, in a beginner's course or something, I will have obviously a good few words of Spanish by then. I may even be able to hold a partial conversation. But after only a few weeks of learning, I will be speaking what is basically crappy Spanish. I will not yet be fluent in the language, will I? By the same logic of people who think that Pidgin...
That's not the same thing. That's like someone who's been speaking Pidgin could have been speaking it their whole life from when they're a kid. It's just one of the languages you'll be hearing, probably the most widely spoken one. Yeah, and between your tribal language or whatever that is. It's really complicated over there. There's different languages. But it's not the same thing as like going to a Spanish course, and then it's like, no, even if you're at intermediate Spanish, you're still on the level of a child in Spanish. You're probably at the level of a 5-year-old in Latin America or Spain, apart from Brazil and other, Haiti or other countries.
Is a version of the English language. Why don't we now say that I'm fluent in crappy Spanish? Also, I understand that there are versions of English. British English, International English, regional dialects and colloquialisms specific to certain English-speaking nations, obviously, but they derive and work within the original core language of English. We don't produce a BBC Cockney News service where the articles begin with, "All right, mate, guess what that geezer Donald Trump done today? God blimey, he's a bloody nutter." We also don't have...
I don't get it. I mean, that's just a certain mannerism of a certain subculture. Yeah, I mean, all English cultures have their unique ways of talking, but Pidgin people could speak educated depending on the circumstances. If they were even going to be in the circumstances, they would have learned that educated speech to get there, especially if they're going to immigrate. Well, maybe not always, of course. So, okay, that's not entirely true.
BBC Leprechaun, with articles written in a stereotypical Irish brogue. Good morning to you. Just the BBC News Service here. I'm going to tell you what the weather's going to be, Bigotry. Yeah, those examples sound ridiculous because they are. But it doesn't stop the BBC from producing essentially what is that very thing with BBC Pidgin. So, would you like to hear?
No, I mean, he has a point. It will, to someone who's not familiar with it, or even to someone who is, yeah, I mean, yeah, it can look kind of silly. It can sound kind of silly.
Maybe read some of these articles? Let's do this, and then you decide. No monitor social media, Nigerians tell military. Since the Nigerian military don't talk say dem they monitor wetin people, they talk for social media on top online, Nigerians don't they react. People way BBC News Pidgin talk to say them they fear, say e be like the government one kill freedom of expression for Nigeria.
Okay, I think I see his point. This is pretty bad. I admit, this is pretty bad. Yeah, I guess this is Pidgin. So, but this doesn't remind me of like the sort of Pidgin that I encountered in Ghana, where there's literally like African words and not so many English words like this. It's more of a blend. So yeah, overall, he has a point that it's silly and it's unnecessary. Sure, no, I totally agree.
Well, at least they're against censorship there too. People begin talk after the Director of Defense...
Okay, so he goes through a big article here, and yeah, it sounds really funny. Let's just fast forward a little bit.
Major General Enshe Anybody, and how to 100 years of development, and this is what the BBC is now promoting. They're promoting a low literacy, piss poor syntax, barely articulate version of the English language just to reach people in these countries. Why? To what economic benefit, you might ask? It's not like there's a profitable market to be reached there. So there's likely...
Well, yeah, they may be promoting a poor level of English, but that's a general condition. That's like, look at smartphone culture. Look at social media. That's doing an even worse job. So, yeah, but it is happening.
A political motivation behind it. This is pandering. And of course, people will say it's racist to criticize the BBC here for doing this, but in fact the opposite is true. What the BBC is doing is practicing the soft bigotry of low expectations. In other words, they're appealing to the lowest common denominator rather than believing that people should better themselves, become more literate, more knowledgeable, seek an education, and therefore a full command of the English language. Now you might say, Dave...
Yeah, no, that's true, yeah. But still, Pidgin language, there's nothing wrong with it existing. And it's better that there be some infiltration of English into Africa than none.
That's not always possible. These are poor countries, after all. These people may not have the access to resources to gain such an education. Okay, well then, if the BBC is...
By the way, just like Christianity, just like it was a good idea that came into Africa, it spreads morals, it spreads behavior, it spreads even the culture for capitalism.
So concerned, why doesn't it produce a free Pidgin to English online education service to help people learn remotely? I mean, it's already produced this website for free. Why not produce an online service to help people who speak Pidgin learn how to speak English properly? This is an attempt to codify an unofficial broken version of English as a legitimate language. It's their belief that these people living there...
Whoa, that's a little harsh. I mean, it is a legitimate language. I mean, I'm not trying to favor Pidgin over English, but it is a legitimate language. Maybe he's a little confused.
Ever be smart enough to learn?
Well, okay, no, he's basically right by the definition of Pidgin, but maybe I don't really agree with the dictionary definition of Pidgin, so anyways.
Proper English. Also, because the BBC is recognizing Pidgin, it means there's no longer an incentive or motivation for people in these countries to have to learn English at all. It's like they're being told, you know the way you're not quite fluent in English? Don't worry about it. We've just dropped the standards, so now you are officially fluent. We see this all the time in the US and states with large immigrant populations. Multiculturalism just encourages more ghettoization and division.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was an English teacher in this language school I've spoken about before for 2 years, teaching people, and the only reason they're doing it is to pass a government test, which has a very low level of, needed to pass, just so to get them through so they can continue in their permanent residency.
They put Spanish on the signs so people don't have to learn English. So why would the BBC do this? Well, because it certainly makes the UK seem like a much more accessible place from an immigration standpoint. It's also possible it's just another means of spreading the BBC's super leftist propaganda to an entirely new audience that would otherwise have never been exposed to it, changing minds through the media. Let's read some more of these articles.
Okay, so I don't think it's necessary to finish the final 4 minutes of the video. I'll give the link to it here, but I don't think he's really going to introduce any new points here. So, yeah, basically I agree with Computing Forever here, and yeah, I could even be wrong about this. I'm just reacting to it a certain way because I happen to, know a bit more about Pidgin, so I was kind of like, I know, maybe nitpicking a bit in this video, but hope you learned something, or at least maybe you learned. Check out Computing Forever's channel. Again, like I said, he's good. He's a good critic of social justice, but if we won our battle, we would quickly go our ways and become enemies. Anyways, have a good day, friends. Hasta luego, amigos.